Robert Plank Show, episode 271. From near fatal car accident to app empire, the Evergreen formula to achieving personal wealth, creating the day you want, and escaping the 9 to 5 rat race with Chad Mureta. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the show. Our guest today is Chad Mureta, and he's a lifestyle business entrepreneur who was confined to a hospital bed after a near-fatal car accident, and Chad's rebel spirit didn't let him stay down for long, and from that hospital bed, he launched his multi-million-dollar app empire. So Chad, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Robert. I appreciate you having me on.
I appreciate you being on, and so, I got to find out what the heck happened. You got in the car accident. What's the deal?
Yeah, it definitely has been serendipitous for sure. Like most people, you find yourself in conflict and at times in your life. And I remember, wanting to have all these goals and dreams and build an incredible life. And I found myself owning a real estate company down in South Carolina. I had actually flipping houses in Vermont and learning, sort of how to make money in real estate. Made a couple $100,000, which, is a lot of money, but to me, it was millions at that time. And I basically took that money, reinvested it into a real estate franchise, and opened up a real estate company down in South Carolina at the worst possible time, 2006, right before everything sort of came crashing down. And I watched all the money that I'd made and all the years of effort sort of start going down the tubes as the market started to crash. And it really was awful. I was working, 12 to 17-hour days, wasn't really sleeping too much, wasn't, really having much of a life. I wasn't seeing my friends and because the ego can be so strong and powerful, I wasn't really able to see through the smog of, my fight or flight. And so I remember one day I was basically freaking out, really stressed. My health wasn't doing good. I lost a bunch of weight, and I had a friend that sent me a message, and she said, hey, right now there's a basketball game up in Charlotte. Let's go. Let's take a night off. You deserve it. Let's go up and actually watch a game. And I went up to see the basketball game with her. And as I'm sitting there, I'm looking around. Basketball was my sport, growing up. And something was very interesting. I looked around. I saw so many happy people, and I saw them enjoying their life. And I saw people laughing and smiling. And then I, went inside and looked at my life, and I was like, what the heck am I doing? Like, this is not what I'm doing. I'm not enjoying things. And, it's been now 2.5 years, and I'm pushing hard, and, I'm working hard, which is what I learned to do. I thought, working hard was the key to success. And I had a wake up moment, on that night. And I said, you know what? I can't go back. I can't go back to this life. I have to figure this out because, this is not a life that I want to lead. And it's amazing sort of how the universe comes in and steps in once you make that commitment, because I was driving home on about a 2.5-hour drive back down to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and a deer jumped out in the interstate in front of me, and I ended up hitting the deer, and I had this, Lincoln Mark LT truck, and I hit it, and I ended up going back and forth, counter steering, and I hit the median, and I flipped my truck 4 times on interstate. And I remember waking up and, completely scared, confused, didn't know if my friend had survived or not. They were cutting me out in the jaws of life. And, I didn't know what was going on. And I get to the hospital, and they're saying, look, you may lose your left arm, and, you'll never be able to play basketball ever again, which for me was big because, I was going to play professional basketball in Italy for a portion of my life. And so that was my defining moment. That was one of the lowest moments I had in my life. And that's sort of where, my journey began to really open myself up to different opportunities.
Oh man, all kinds of stuff happened then.
Yeah, it was major. I had my real estate companies. Obviously that model wasn't working for me. And I knew that if I wasn't there, as you know, if you're the owner and you're not there leading the troops, things can go down. And I knew that I was going to lose any amount of money that I had left that I invested in was going to go down the tubes. And I was absolutely miserable in that hospital room, and not really knowing what to do. Grasping at straws and trying to figure out, okay, what's my next stage. And the doctors came in, and my friend was with them, one of my good friends that I'd known for about 10 years. And he came in and he said, you know what? I know you're going to be in the hospital for 6 months inside and out of operations. And he's like, have you ever thought about apps? And it was very interesting, Robert, because that first day for me was the iPhone day, which was I got sent a iPod from my ex-girlfriend, and I basically traded it in for an iPhone. The first day of having an iPhone was during my accident, and I'm looking to the left of my hospital bed, and right on my on the little stoop there was my iPhone. And I remember thinking, like, okay, this is strange. I've got a pile of cut up clothes that they cut out to get me out of my vehicle, and I've got this darn iPhone that I haven't really, gotten into yet and used. And he passed me this article about apps. And funny enough, it was, you probably remember this, it was two guys that were making a lot of money with apps, and it was because of this iFart app that they were making tons of money. Do you remember that app?
Oh yeah, Joel Comm.
Exactly. And so I remember laying in the hospital bed, on morphine and all kinds of other drugs, thinking, okay, man, if they can do it, like, I don't need to be a tech person. I can do this. And it's amazing what morphine does, how creative it makes you, because I started sketching out, my idea on my opposite arm. And in about, 2 days later, I had this idea around security, because I had nurses coming in the room, and I was really, really like thinking, man, if I had personal information on this thing, what keeps people from seeing certain things? And so I sketched out my first idea. I had no idea how I was going to get it done, but lucky enough for me, the guy to the right from me in the hospital bed was from India. He was in a body cast. He also got in a car accident, and he had a cousin in India that I somehow connected to on Skype, and I was ending up, I borrowed money from my stepdad, $1,200, to get my first app going into the store, which was a pivotal moment. And it really was my Hail Mary moment, because, I didn't have much going for me. I was losing my left arm. My business was going down the tubes. I had weeded out all my relationships because I wasn't spending time with anybody. And I honestly didn't know what I was doing at all. And about 6 weeks later, I ended up publishing this app, and it became one of the top apps in the store. And I started making money from countries that I didn't even realize were a country. And that's when I finally said, wow, lifestyle businesses, apps, this whole business is actually a real thing. And I haven't looked back since.
Awesome. And what was the app called?
The first app that I did was Fingerprint Security. It was a fingerprint security app. So it was like developed sort of a Matrixy style, James Bondy feel. And so I would scan through fingerprints. If someone grabbed the phone and they put their fingerprint on there and it knew it wasn't you, it would basically, this alarm would go off and it would freak people out. And it wasn't using actual real fingerprint technology at the time, but it mimicked it. And it was done well enough that people actually thought it was reading your fingerprint.
Funny, I think I saw a couple of those in the early iPhones, and I remember thinking, like, that's so weird. There's no fingerprint scanner invented yet.
Exactly.
So awesome, and it sounds sort of like that track that you were on with the real estate thing. It was just like kind of panic mode, and like kind of spiraling into nothing. And it sounds almost like if that car accident hadn't happened, then maybe you would have just kept going with real estate stuff, or like, tried to make it work, or just kind of like double down or something like that.
I would have. Yeah, I totally would have. I mean, I was so resistant to letting go of that, and knowing that the market was crashing, knowing that, there really wasn't much that I could do, but my ego was so tied and attached to holding on to something, because I didn't want to lose. I'm a winner. I didn't want to lose. And and everyone looked up to me, and I put my money into it, and my identity was so tied to that if I lose, that means I was a failure. And so, yeah, it really took me almost losing my life to wake up from that fog and to truly see, who I am and what I really wanted to do, and to really have the courage to step out of a model that honestly just wasn't working for me.
Awesome, because you mentioned as you were kind of explaining how this all went down, was that there was that fight or flight fog, and it sounds like after like one of the worst possible things that could happen to you did, then you kind of had that sort of quiet time to sit in the hospital and think things through. And what's also cool
Yes.
about that story is there was like the entire universe literally was telling you to go in this direction. Like there was the iPod, there was the friend that brought in the article, there was the Indian guy the next bit over, and then he had this friend. Like it's crazy how it's like things. I mean, all these things lined up to kind of push you in this new direction.
Yeah, no, it was serendipitous. I mean, it was really aligned, and I feel super grateful, super lucky for the whole thing. And typically, I think in life there are messages for all of us that we either are open to seeing or we're not open to seeing. And luckily for me, and unlucky for me in that situation, is the sense of I didn't really have any other options to not see the messages because they were so glaring. And I was there. I wasn't going anywhere. Obviously, trapped in this hospital bed, and I was a captive audience. One of my biggest competitive advantages, and the reason why I was able to figure out a formula to make apps successful, is because all I could do was sit in that hospital bed. And since my only hope that I was grasping onto was making money and creating a new life, I just looked at apps all day long. I went through the phone, I played with the apps, I went through them, and I really started understanding the working components of marketing and what consumers want, and the funnel and the flow of how people actually consume and download these things.
And so, what kind of things specifically did you come across when it came to making apps? Like, what kind of do's and don'ts? Because you mentioned a little bit there about how, like, you looking at the existing apps and you were thinking about stuff like security and you were sketching stuff out. But I'm sure you kind of came across like things not to do, things to do as far as making apps, right?
Yes, yes, for sure. So, I mean, my first rule was always not spending a lot of money on apps, making sure that I could find a way, $1,000 or so to spend, and I could get an ROI out of that very quickly. Because, the nice thing with apps, because my real estate company, I had customer service people, I had agents, I had project managers, I had CFO, I had all these people that were under a team that we had to deal with. And with apps, you can really leverage what Apple's created and Google's created with this platform. So they distribute, they collect the funds, they do all of that. And so, immediately I wanted to make sure that, okay, my formula is evergreen. I want to work with an app that has inherent demand. It isn't something that's just a random game. Now, games are successful, obviously, and some have been incredibly successful. A lot of our students have actually made games and done really well. But my strategy has always been, I want to create something that I know I just have to get the marketing right, because there's enough value there in a specific need where I know that people are going to be using it, not just today, not just next month, but for years to come. And so, few of them is, obviously cheaper, and that doesn't mean that doesn't mean like bad value or bad quality, but just not having a $10,000-$20,000 budget. And then making sure that it is an evergreen, always sort of in demand. And then for me, I think what really separated early on was I understood the marketing. So I understood that, when I'm going to build an app, it has to use certain keywords that resonate with people. And some of those keywords are very different internationally than they are US. So the other massive shift was, well, this is a worldwide audience, and security, the keyword is great in the US, but it's going to be a very different word, trading to going into Spanish or going into German. German's going to be different security. So being able to understand that it's a global audience and then localize my specific keywords into those audiences so they can also download and understand what the app does was also very key.
Awesome, because I imagine that there's a lot of apps out there that are great, but just not known about because they're not using those keywords, or they're using the wrong sorts of words for things.
Yes, yes, exactly. Exactly. And then, just with the screenshots themselves, because obviously the marketing materials are just like any website, whatever, it is the core of your product. And so being very, very strict with understanding, each keyword and knowing that, if my first screenshot is going to be seen by a lot of people, it is, I mean, apps it's an impetuous move. You've got 5 seconds, 5 to 10 seconds to really close somebody. So they're going to look at the name of the title of the app. They're going to look at the icon, has to look quality, has to look in the same direction that the title tells them. And then immediately they're going to go to that first screenshot. And that first screenshot needs to give them the actual number one benefit that they're looking for. So I dialed that in. I copy wrote that, and I got really, really clear with what is the number one benefit for my customer. So when they looked at that screenshot in the last part of the sales transaction with the app, that it was so clear that it converted and I got a download from them.
And how did you come across this kind of stuff? Like how did you get to realize that this was important? Was it just a matter of like you going through and looking at all the apps that were already there?
Yeah, I mean, I was in the hospital for a while, and then after that, I was in a lazy boy recliner for 6 months because I couldn't really move up and down. My arm was in so many pieces. So I had a captive audience. I just sat there and I was looking at all the successful apps, and luckily, this was like the first time in business that I could drive around in real estate and I could see ads and I could see houses for sale and sort of what they were doing, but from a digital perspective, you could imagine this was like the first platform that you could really not only see what they were doing marketing wise, but also get inside the app and play with it and know what was going on. So I just became a consumer, and I think before any supplier, you got to be an addict. And I became an addict of apps, and I started really understanding everything. And I didn't have any book I read. I didn't have really anything. I mean, what helped me was I wasn't a tech person. I didn't understand a lot, but I was really good at just spending time inside of apps and finding patterns inside of them. And I just started testing things out like we all do in business. And some things worked, some things didn't work. And I just kept doing more things that worked and kept tweaking.
Awesome. And so, sort of along those lines, I mean, what happened in that time, like after you got out of the hospital? Like, did your arm eventually heal, and what happened to your friend, and what did you eventually build with the Zap company?
Yeah, so my arm, so they replaced, I have titanium from my elbow all the way up to my humerus head, which is basically my shoulder. So I am very, very useful in gunfights because nothing gets through titanium. I have my arm about, I don't know, 70% of what it was, but you wouldn't really tell if you saw me. I still work out, and I proved all the doctors wrong. I can throw a ball, I can play basketball, and so that's been amazing. And then the friend that actually came to me, one of my best friends, we ended up building a couple app companies together, and we built actually the first emoji app that did over 150 million downloads. So we ended up building up a few companies and selling them off, and we did a lot of business together. And obviously from that point, I just continued to proliferate my app businesses, and then I wrote a book called App Empire, really explaining the process. And now I've got a huge group of appreneurs that I call them that are out living a lifestyle business doing the same thing.
Awesome. And so, when you're looking at sort of like this, now that you're kind of on the other side of this, whole ordeal, and you've built up this new business, I mean, what's the difference between now and then? Because it sounds like to me like the way that the real estate business was going before, it sounded like you're making good money, but in exchange for just this overworked, super stressed out, always putting out fires kind of lifestyle. And it sounds like now things are a lot more relaxed, at least from
Yeah.
as you're describing it.
Yeah, wealth is health, and balance and really alignment and doing what you want to do and showing up and creating the day that you want. And I was making okay money in real estate, but I was a prisoner. At the end of the day, I was more in the rat race than somebody was 9 to 5 because I was working harder, longer hours. I wasn't happy. I wasn't in my flow. I really didn't have a system for managing my life or managing my company. I felt trapped. And yeah, and it's completely shifted from that. And that's the opportunity that I have. And anyone listening, it doesn't take obviously a horrific car accident to shift. You can step outside of your own sort of mindset and be the observer and see what's going on and make these tough decisions. I wish I had to early on, but obviously my path is my path, and I'm very grateful for sort of how it happened. And nowadays, it's really less about the money, and it's more about, what's my ultimate day, and how am I doing it, and am I excited about the projects I'm working on, and I am, and I'm very creative, and I love the people that I get to connect with. I love the students, and I read their success stories and what they've done, and it's a whole different life when you meet your needs and your consciousness rise. Yogananda says, consciousness comes from conflict, and for me, I really was able to see that and get that, and until that point, I wasn't really able to give back to people into this world, and so my contribution need is met now, and for me, I just feel a lot more aligned, a lot more myself, and not this scarcity driven sort of bulldozer kid that I remember that I was, just trying to get through the day. Now I'm excited about my day, and I don't have to sit there and complain about all the things that I can't do, or this crappy day that I have to go through.
Awesome. So it's like things had to get really bad before, like in order to clear out all the crap and then and kind of get better. And so you're mentioning that you have this app company, and you have this book, and you have these students. So can you kind of tell us about those sorts of things, where people can go and find out all these different things about you?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I wrote a book called App Empire. So you can go to appempire.com, appempire.com. And if you actually, I've got a couple for your group, appempire.com/free. I put some of my top resources for you guys to check out, that you can get going on your app journey if you choose to do that. But yeah, I got super motivated once I was able to use my arm again and get my health back. And I was really able to look outside of my own life and say, you know what, I want to give back, and I want to be able to write a book. I want to be able to, basically, give back to society. And so I started writing a book, and started saying, you know what, I want more people around that can do the things that I do, because once you have lifestyle and once you can travel, as it changes everything. And so that's what I did. I basically wrote a book while I was traveling around the world, and created an incredible group of entrepreneurs that were motivated to do the same thing. And I looked at my model that I was using. I've always been ROI positive on every app I've done, over 400 now, and it's a very simple model. And so I got very passionate about making sure that people were also able to get away from the 9 to 5 or the rat race, and this feeling that I had. I was so passionate that I didn't want people to go through what I went through. And also, when you're traveling, as I'm sure it's like you want other people to live the lifestyle, and I didn't have many people that could just pick up and leave and run their business from their phone, which is what I still do. And so I was able to create this book that did really well, and international bestseller. And then I started speaking at different events and just getting people, into my program.
Awesome stuff. So everyone should go to appempire.com to check out the book, and then appempire.com/free to check out those top resources. And so Chad, you mentioned that you created these 400 different apps, and so can you maybe list maybe a couple of your favorites, just to give us an idea of some of the cool stuff you've created?
Yeah, totally. So one of the biggest ones obviously is the emoji app, which you probably have on your phone. We've had over 150 million downloads now. It's been a top 100 app for now 4.5 years. It's still top 100 in the App Store. That one's been really fun, because now we're working with different brands and getting their emojis out there. I've got a fun video editing app where you're able to go in and basically create your own movies from the different videos that you take. And so we give different sound bites, and sort of like the Apple trailers on steroids. That's been a lot of fun. I've created a few games here and there that I've just been creative, and first person shooting games and stuff like that have been really, really fun. And so I've sort of looked at, and I'm working now on on a ski app because I'm a skier, and it's Evergreen, and so I'm making sure that skiers know where all the trails are and where all the good powder is, and how to connect with other skiers, and how to really check out the mountains, the conditions. And I'm always excited and interested to create over things that I actually love. So most of my apps now are around things that I really like and I'm the consumer of. And that typically is what I recommend people to do, because if you're the demographic, better than anybody typically, what value is and how to create that value for your audience.
Awesome. I mean, that's really good advice. Make the app that you wish you could have, right? And I don't know
Exactly.
I don't know about you, but like playing around with the ski game sounds a lot more fun than dealing with contractors or dealing with tenants or something like that, right?
Exactly. It sure is. I mean, it's amazing to me that you can create, like, we can talk right now, we can create an idea, and in 10 days, we can have it created and uploaded into the App Store, and somebody from some random country in Europe can be downloading our creation, and we can be making money from it. I mean, it still boggles my mind from this day how that's happening. It's absolutely incredible.
Just so that you can have that huge instant reach all across the world. What a time to be alive. Well,
Exactly.
cool. Well, this was a really cool conversation, and I hope that everyone listening got a lot out of it. And what I really like about what we talked about today was we kind of switched all these gears and talked about all these cool areas, right? Because Chad isn't just a motivational speaker. He didn't just say, here's some cool stuff. He shared this cool life story and fit in all this advice about building an app, and not just, if you guys are looking to make an app company or make app, there's a lot of like specific details, but even if you aren't, there's all kinds of like, marketing and lifestyle tips and advice kind of hidden in there. So make sure you listen to this episode 2 or 3 times if you can, and make sure to go to appempire.com to check out that book, and appempire.com/free to check out those top resources. So Chad, had lots of fun today. Thanks for being on the show, and I appreciate what you had to share with us.
Thank you so much, Robert. It was a pleasure.
We really appreciate you listening to today's episode of The Robert Plank Show. Subscribe to us on iTunes and rate and review us at robertplank.com/iTunes.